Hi, welcome all. This is the second part of uh, our lecture, Disability and Fiction. This time, I chose to close read Rabindranath Tagore's story Vision, and the title of the talk is Blindness as Tapas, a review of Rabindranath Tagore's story Vision. Well, story outline. What happens in the story? Well, there's this couple, Kumo and her husband Avinash. Kumo gets married when she is very young, a little girl, and and when she gets married when her husband is getting trained for a doctor. Okay, and as expected, she goes and lives in her husband's place, as it was and still is the practice in India. Okay, and when she's there, she gives birth to a stillborn baby, and she almost dies during the delivery. This is part of the early part of the 20th century reality. Okay, and then she starts losing sight as well. So she's given treatment by her husband, who is now getting trained as a student. But his medicine doesn't work. Her brother, elder brother, whom she calls Dada, he comes in rescue with alternative medicines, but she rejects them all because she is very fond of her husband and also quite worshipful towards him. All this illustrates strict gender hierarchy, in that part of the world. So then what happens? Well, Kumo loses her sight. She becomes blind. Then the rest of the story is about her husband's changing attitude towards her blindness, and she and her in at large. There is this new girl coming in life because Avinash's aunt wants him to get remarried, get a new wife because Kumo is blind, and he, according to her and Avinash too, in many ways, that Kumo cannot be a good wife because she is blind. And Hemangini, the new girl, she comes in the picture, but due to divine machinations and so on, the marriage between Avinash and Hemangini, the new bride, doesn't happen. Instead, she gets married to Dada, Kumo's brother, who is a lawyer. I failed to mention that. Okay, and that is the story. So there is a very strong component of the disability and gender component in the story. Okay, but why did I choose this story? Okay. Well, to Tagore's larger poetic vision, he was interested in how contradictions. He was interested in the question of reality, which, according to him, is more than what we could see. Well, he is a modernist, and in many ways, he was looking at truths that are beyond sensory reality. And he also wanted people to accept the view that contradictions do live together and they form what you call reality. In Tagore's poetic vision also was deeply seeped in the Indian rasa or aesthetic tradition. Now, let's again use the same parameters that we used in the first lecture for understanding disability and fiction. Let's start with the problem of embodiment. Okay, let me read a quote for you from the story. The story is written in the first person point of view. That is, Kumo is given the voice. When I was a very young wife, I gave birth to a dead child and came near to death myself. I recovered strength very slowly, and my eyesight became weaker and weaker. Well, the story of blindness in Kumo is actually told by her. Blindness here becomes much more than just an incapacity to see. It is a complex embodiment. See, before her blindness, her Kumo and her husband were one unit, as it were, body and body and spirit. But when blindness came, the story became different. He became her caregiver, and he became her torture, both. Okay, and the way she embodies, one conducts herself and sees the story as it unfolds. Her life, when she sees her life differently, we also see it differently. Before she became blind, we see the story through our eyes. When she became blind, through her ears, touch, sense of smell, and so on. Okay, so through Kumo, we understand her complex embodiment of early 20th century Bengali reality as portrayed by Tagore. Well, let us come to point of view. Remember, point of view is about taking a point and then traveling from there. Here, point of view almost take different competing cosmologies. Competing cosmologies get into the picture because of blindness, Kumo's blindness. Look at it. Look at this here. First, we have Kumo herself, a devoted wife. Okay. First of all, she felt guilty because patriarchy demands that she does unquestioning service to her husband. Okay. Second is the medical clinical point of view of her husband. He thinks that her blindness is nothing more than a clinical reality. So he puts lots of ointments, potions, and keeps prescribing things which doesn't work at all. So finally the surgery, and through surgery Kumo loses her sight completely. Once his medical point of view is over, then he gets into religious point of view. Um, she's no more an object of attraction or sex. Now she is elated to the position of a goddess. Okay, he takes recourse to religious ceremonialization to make Kumo a goddess of an object of worship rather than attraction and sex. A new cosmology set in. Think about Kumo's brother, whom she affectionately calls Dada. He is an advocate. He has a legal perspective. He has a very rational, legal, and matter-of-fact perspective about his sister's blindness, and his relationship with brother-in-law actually is disturbed. And then there's this cosmologies of conjugal love, cosmologies of women folk who have different beliefs about childbirth and lack thereof, cosmologies local to village life, urban life, and they're all competing in contradictions. So Tagore, because of blindness, blindness is a very useful narrative bonding, narrative armature here, on which so many point of views by way of cosmologies come together and depart. You see, they don't. There is true. There is by narrative wise, it is told from the point of view of Kumo, but it keeps shifting, and shifting happens sometimes abruptly, sometimes violently too. Okay, let's get into the third item in the agenda when talking about disability in fiction here, the character. Well, I told you a lot about character in the previous lecture, where I said character is the stuff that drives the story. Here, because blindness is an everyday reality, conjugal reality, it brings into sharp relief the personhood of people who are surrounding it, especially a character like Avinash. Avinash, who was a devoted husband, his attitude towards blindness changed. I told that already. Well, it is just not Kumo's blindness. He himself becomes symbolically blind in many situations. For example, when he is poor student, he is devoted to his wife. When he gains money, he doesn't attend her much. And even more ghastly is the fact that he doesn't do his duty or dharma as a medic. He drives out a Mussalman who comes to pleading help for his granddaughter. Baba, help my granddaughter, Allah will bless you. He says, well, leave alone Allah. I want to know what you can give me, and so on. So he closes his eyes to virtue, but gives more value to money. Okay, and as this sort of blinding is not enough, Avinash becomes blind in many ways. His character keeps changing, and the changing is given meaning through the metaphor of blindness. For example, he is blind struck by Himangine's appearance. He falls in love with her. He starts refusing to see his wife, but now his wife does not appear attractive. The vision of his wife is not pleasing anymore. Some other woman, he becomes blind to her. On the other hand, he becomes fully engrossed with the sight of another woman. So money, flesh, and power. Now he becomes blind to his surroundings. He seeks power, like Faust. You see, so for character building, blindness becomes almost a series of landmarks to develop character here. Okay, well, this is how you may say this is how you read the story, but you see, the metaphors are so conspicuous; it's very hard to miss it. Let me move on. Talk about plot now. Another important device through which we understand the close interface between disability and fiction. Well, blindness again illustrates the fact that in the previous lecture I was mentioning that plot is not a straightforward narrative. It's not a straightforward business. Okay, no, beginning, middle, and end does not obviously happen all that neatly. And Tagore is a modernist, and that becomes very clear in the story. Let me read an excerpt now, just to make a point about it. This is coming again from Kumo. Oh, what lies we women have to tell! When we are mothers, we tell lies to pacify our children. And when we are wives, we tell lies to pacify the fathers of our children. We are never free from this necessity. Okay, now, why in discussing plot, this is very important. The idea of deception, hide and seek, playing hide and seek game, closing eyes and going around, escape one trap and go into another trap, hide a little bit, hide some reality. Because here women don't have power, and to manage their lives effectively with men who are nothing less than bullies, they play the hide and seek game. That is the story of deception, or the blindness game. For example, I was talking about a few minutes ago how Avinash used to bring medicines and treat his wife with his bleak medical knowledge, and so does Dada, Kumo's brother. Now, this woman has to pacify both the men, otherwise they will end up fighting, and when two big elephants are in a war, it is the grass which suffers, says Kumo. So in order for this little grass to be alive, she needs to just protect herself and this time it is hide and seek game. Okay, so what she tell her husband, brother, Dada, Dada tells, you may not be liking me getting medicines, but those medicines are good for you. But she tells Dada, I have been having your medicine. I did not tell my husband. But in reality, she threw it in the well to her husband. She would say, although the medicines did not work anything on her eyes, he would say, oh, it feels much better today, just to pacify her husband and keep him near her. And when she becomes blind, she needs to seek recourse to such rhetoric to draw emotional infrastructure around her by rhetoric. And that rhetoric involves hiding something and revealing something. Look at this contradiction. This is again Tagore's vision of poetry, poetic truth. Poetic truth reveals certain things, but it does not reveal, but it hides some things. In that sense, it is a valuable complement or the other side of science. You must, I strongly recommend that you all read his famous conversations with Einstein, how science and art interact, and their conversations on reality are very telling about modernist preoccupation with science and reality and so on. Okay, right. Let's move on. The fifth item in where I was talking about how the parameters in which disability and fiction can be discussed is forms of storytelling. Look at this. I will how to discuss this. Well, let me say this. This story vision is in 5 parts, and each part complicates the other part. One cosmology after other, it comes into each other in revealing some one or other story about the narrative of blindness. Well, Sedoni Smith in the book Reading Autobiography talks about 3 kinds of eye, but here Kumo gets into different kinds of eye actually. Let me read an excerpt for you. He placed a kiss between my brows. At that moment, the third eye of divine wisdom was open, where he kissed me, and verily I had a consecration. Aha! Now, I told you when Kumo lost his sight, her husband Avinash started. In the beginning, he said he will not marry anyone. He will be a totally devoted husband, and so on. Later on, their intimate conversations evolve around the idea that Kumo is a kind of a goddess, certainly not sex goddess, but a goddess of worship. Now, what happens? She herself assumes that divine eye. Many times she would say, from now on she would be that that person, the because of her blindness, she has access to the other world. Look at this utterance from her. I said in my own mind, it is well, I am no longer able to serve him in the lower world of household cares, but I shall rise to a higher region. I shall bring down blessings from above. No more, 1 second, no more lies, no more deceptions for me. All the blind, or all the littlenesses and hypocrisies of my former life shall be banished forever. Look at this. See, this is the contradiction. On the one hand, she can say radical things like to her husband, oh, you men can only say be heroes in front of your women, but outside you are nothing. But on the other hand, she can seek recourse to a pre-modern idea that blindness has something to do, is otherworldly. Blind people have access to the other world, the divine world. This is why if you look at statues of Homer and so on, it looks like Homer's head is slightly raised above, like this, and he is in touch with the divine. And so assumes Kumo now, who will in some sense bring divine blessings from above, the other world, to this world. So what am I saying? The point of views differ because Kumo takes into different point of views. The point of view of a goddess, the point of view of an ordinary housewife, the point of view of a blind person living in different senses, we're using different senses other than sight. And thus unfolds the poetic truth through the story of vision. Now, concluding remarks. I use this story to illustrate, using the same pointers like point of view, character, plot, and so on, to illustrate what I have talked in to illustrate the points that I made in the previous lecture. Now, what do we conclude? Disability as a method and a framework is very useful, not just to sensitize literary readers about the problems of disability, and that's a truism, but it changes the way we look at literature very radically. First of all, it reveals that disability is a ubiquitous phenomenon and a framework and a method, because we all, again I repeat, we all have to read, consume, and connect to literature and fiction and otherwise with different capacities, limitations, and strength. And that is what disability can alert us to. Thank you.